I'll admit someone. Okay. Wait lang ha. Wait lang. Technical things. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Raven, we can start, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm clear, no? I mean, in terms of sounds. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon po. We will start po, and then as we start, I mean, some of our friends probably will be in the Zoom, and we'll just accept them. Okay, APCU members and trustees, to our distinguished and eminent resource speakers, to our media partners, to our local and foreign friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the APCU Forum with APPCU Laureates, with the theme, The Role of Media and Media Cooperation in the Promotion of Philippine-China Friendship and Understanding. Ako po, my name po is Ana Malinduguy. I am the moderator of this forum. As we all know, the media play an important role in society as a source of information. The evolution of media has affected the structure of both the international and the domestic system and politics, thus indirectly impacting foreign policy. Media also plays an important role in diplomacy, as heads of state and non-state actors make increasing use of media as a major instrument for communication. Hence, through time, media have had a significant impact on the conduct and coverage of public diplomacy. However, in the information age, in this day and age, in this time, it's all media is jam-packed and flooded with disinformation, fake news, and information war. It is but a huge challenge for media practitioners and media networks to produce accurate and balanced news and reporting. So this afternoon, we will hear from our distinguished and esteemed resource speakers on the role of media and media cooperation in the promotion of Philippine-China understanding and friendship, and also on how media can either facilitate or hinder the thriving of good relation between and among countries, more particularly Philippines and China bilateral relation and understanding. So to start our program, may I call on our APCU Vice President, Mr. Felix Guanzon, for the invocation. Sir Felix.
Let us all put ourselves in the presence of our Lord. Lord, thank you for allowing us today to gather and be able to share our knowledge and time with one another. Bless all our endeavors, especially today's meeting. Guide us in our discussion, enlighten our mind in every decision that we make. May you bestow your blessing after this meeting so that we may be able to perform our roles and responsibility in the spirit of your love and generosity. Although we are meeting virtually, we know that you are here in our midst. We don't have the benefit of face-to-face interaction, but your grace, we are certain these online meetings will be a success, and we can accomplish all our planned goals as well. We know this is not possible without your divine guidance and permission. Since we dedicate this meeting to you, all this we ask in your mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you po, Sir Felix. The next part of our program is the opening remarks. May I call on APCO Chairman Secretary Raul Lambino. Sir Raul Lambino, the floor is yours po.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah. Is my sound okay? Can you hear me?
Po. Yes po, loud and clear, sir.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to warmly welcome our esteemed colleagues in the Association for Philippine-China Understanding, our guests and other members taking part in this afternoon's forum, which promises to be as interesting as it will be very provocative. We will be exploring the role of the media that could possibly have in the promotion of China-Philippine friendship and understanding. And we will be discussing practical ways, possibly innovative ways, by which such friendship and understanding could be made better than they are now. I can foresee that the answers will not come by easily to suit our own views about the media, whatever they may be. One view I find relevant to our topic is that of the journalist J. Herbert Atschel, Writing about the media's role in human affairs in his landmark book, Agents of Power, Adolfo acknowledges that the press, and I quote, can and does act as powerful actor. But then he maintains the thesis that the press is the agent of powerful political forces and economic interests. In other words, each press outfit is driven by the interests of those who have ownership control. This, I believe, influences heavily how the media behave, and more importantly, explains why they cover and write about certain events and personalities the way they do. By their news content and spin, they drive public opinion, which in turn shapes public policy and colors private responses. Reduced into the context of today's forum, control of the media by such forces, either political or economic, thus intimately affects our options in promoting the cause we are espousing. And the task at hand has been rendered even more complicated by a technology-induced phenomenon unique in our time. This is the explosion of the internet and the rising implacable force called social media. Their effect is to transform our traditional concept of printed and broadcast news in such a revolutionary way that news can be had now in real time at a click of a finger. But the way social media has behaved gave rise, among other things, to misinformation and media manipulation, even spawning the phenomenon of fake news, a concept alien to our generation that was brought up in the media environment of the 1970s. I remember that for those of us growing up in the provinces during the decade, events in Manila could race by, such as the proclamation of martial law in 1972, and we would be blissfully unaware of it for 24 hours or even more. But we embrace the news as the truth when they reach us, trusting in the judgment of anonymous editors working in some stuffy Manila newsroom. But these days, even as they are called the new media, social media have been transformed into platforms for old-fashioned dirty tricks campaigns. Let me cite a prominent example. As recently as July this year, satellite photos that were posted in the internet by Florida-based Singularity Corporation were identified by its CEO as ships, Chinese ships, dumping human feces in the South China Sea so much, she said, that you can see it in the space. Writing in the Manila Times, much respected columnist Rigoberto Tiglao made the following observation, and I quote, while it did not caption the photo as a Chinese ship, Singularity obviously calculated that some stupid Filipino media outfit would conclude that it was so. The online version of GMA7 did. An alert netizen, however, reverse researched the photo and discovered that it was an image of an identified ship dumping waste in Australia's Great Barrier Reef in 2014. It was only then that Singularity tried to excuse itself, saying it clearly captioned the image as that of an unknown ship and that GMA7 was an irresponsible news organization, quote unquote. Mr. Tiglao then leads to the conclusion that what had finally stuck in viewers' minds was the image of a sea vessel dumping human feces. Obviously, there are challenges to face in the pursuit of our goal to further promote Philippines-China friendship and understanding through media cooperation. One swift black propaganda strike could undo in one moment what it had taken us years to build and propagate. So we ask the question, how do we proceed from here? What are the parameters of media cooperation? The dangers of media manipulation? We will seek guidance from our two illustrious resource speakers today who are veterans in the media industry. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Mr. Herman Ka-Mentong Laurel, who is host of Global Talk News Radio and Radyo Pilipinas, and Mr. Adolfo Paglinawan, who is president and editor-in-chief of sovereignph.com. So again, a warm welcome to you all. Mabuhay.
Thank you po, APCU Chairman Secretary Lambino. Before we introduce our first resource speaker, let me quickly mention our forum guidelines just for us to have a very efficient conduct of our forum po. All participants will be muted, of course, except for the speakers and myself. Participants may type their questions and comments via the Zoom chat box, and those interested to have copies of the resource speaker's presentation, kindly signify your interest in the Zoom chat box, and I'll provide, and the Secretariat will provide you the presentation materials. But please also indicate your email address. Friends and colleagues, thank you for your attention. Now, to introduce our first resource speaker, let me call on Raven to play for us a short audiovisual presentation we prepared. Raven, kindly play the AVP.
Herman Ka-Mentong Laurel currently serves as the host of Global Talk News Radio for Radyo Pilipinas 1-738M and of Ang Maestro, The Unfinished Revolution, broadcasted by Radyo Pilipinas or RP1. He is also the host of an online podcast, Power Thinks, of the Global Talk News Radio or GTNR, streamlined in various social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube, and one of the hosts of a television show, Opinion Ngayon, aired in Golden Nations Network every Friday. Ka-Mentong is the founder and director of the Philippine BRICS Strategic Studies, a think tank inspired by China's advocacy towards a multipolar world structure. He was a former columnist of Daily Tribune for InfoWars and Die Hard 3, published every Monday and Wednesday, and had served as a columnist of Opinion for Consumers Demand, Critics Critic, and People's Struggle Weekly, and the former administrator of the Philippine Refugee Processing Center, now called the Bataan Technology Park, Inc. He served as the host of Journeys, Chronicles of Our Asian Century, that showcased developments in Asia, China, and Philippines-China bilateral relations, and offer analysis and news from Asian, Filipino, and global perspectives. Ka-Mentong is considered a major figure in Philippine journalism, reporting authoritatively to the Filipino public and the international community the factual realities between Philippines and China and the principled global vision of China to build a better world for all peoples and nations. His passion and conviction in promoting mutual understanding, friendship, and good bilateral relations between the Philippines and China are reflective of his writings and commentaries, which facilitate in clarifying for the public the truth about the South China Sea dispute that has complicated the diplomatic relations between the two countries to an inconvenient degree until today. Ka-Mentong is now a senior citizen and will be celebrating his 70th year in October of this year, 2021. But age is just a number for Ka-Mentong. Though almost 70 of age already, he is still going strong, writing several articles in a week and maintaining 3 TV, radio, and online broadcasts.
Thank you, Raven, for that AVP. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, we are also live streamed in different social media platforms. We shared our Zoom. So other friends are also watching us via social media. So ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our first resource speaker, Mr. Herman Ka-Mentong Laurel. Ka-Mentong, the floor is yours po. Take it away.
Yes, magandang hapon po sa lahat. Good afternoon, and thank you for the applause from Mr. Benedicto and others. I rephrased our theme for my talk, which I hope I can finish in 20 to 25 minutes, as a media and media cooperation in creating what? What is our purpose? Creating the peaceful community of shared future for the world. Well, anyway, thank you, Mr. Secretary Lambino, and welcome back to the active world, and congratulations for defeating the virus of our times. Okay, let's start. Congratulations, first of all, to APCU and all those among Filipinos and Filipino media workers who strive to create a better atmosphere for Philippine-China understanding, friendship, and cooperation. The Publicus survey of July 2021, just this year, showing 53% of Filipinos looking at China with an open mind provides very tangible evidence of the success of the initiatives of APCU and similar efforts. The reason for their success is simple: helping Filipinos do, in quotes, reality check on what China is really doing in this world. At the same time, however, the misconception pushed by US information war campaign of Chinese aggression still persists due to totally distorted reporting of the finer points of the issues. But even this is slowly being straightened out with more reality checks. When the idea of media with a capital M is invoked, that is the mainstream media, what role do they play? I am media with a small m, not mainstream, but independent, because I am not linked nor paid by any outside party to carry out my media tasks of reporting what I believe then facts and truth, and I believe firmly, and I truly then perform the mandate of the fourth estate. This has allowed me to be free to report facts and truth, also to establish alliances with like-minded individualists or free or independent media people like my colleague Adolfo Paglinawan, whom you will hear after this, and many others. Under big business and finance. And let's show our first slide, Dito, just to highlight this. Today, it is owned by GE, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, and Time Warner, CBS. And in the US, media ownership decreased from 50 companies in 1983, owning 90% of US media, down to today, 6 companies owning 90% of US media. These 6 companies have intertwining interests with the ruling economic political powers in the United States and the deep state in America. They certainly have impact on Philippine media too. Now let's go to slide 2, which shows the FCC chief in 2011 changing some rules of the FCC. And what is this rule? Actually, these changes started way back in the Reagan period, but firmed up in 2011. But over the decades, this has already impacted American media. Media content regulation has also changed through this period. To be precise, when the Fairness Doctrine, in quotes, was abolished in 1987. The doctrine established in 1949 by the Federal Communications Commission of the United States required broadcasters to devote a reasonable portion of their broadcast time to the discussion and consideration of issues in a fair and balanced manner. Over time, this has changed American broadcasting, including print media, to become very polarized, very one-sided, and so on. They impacted greatly the overall global media environment. Since the news media of the Anglosphere, is English-speaking world, the English-speaking world has been inordinately dominant, the Anglosphere, in the world, particularly in Philippine media. As for internet social media, we also see the separate set of problems with them and observe how constrictions are also being applied on them and on users on such platforms as Facebook. I have just been banned for a month again by Facebook for the nth time this year, and friends who communicate with me get warnings too. And now we go to slide 3. Okay, so we are now in a world of information wars. Today, in the era of US-initiated competitive rivalry with the peacefully rising China, we swim in an ocean of information, misinformation, and disinformation, particularly targeted at China. We are faced with distorted, manipulated news of all the time, targeting the perceived enemies of US domination. We move on. Okay. We should all be very familiar by now, those who have lived through the past 50 years, of the stark instances of information war, fake news that has changed the world, cost millions of lives, caused us grievous sufferings like oil price hikes, financial crisis, interest rate hikes, unemployment, inflation, and political realignments and whatnot. Here are some instances uh, that I will cite, but let me just check the sequence. Yeah, okay. Very few may now remember the Kuwaiti incubator hoax, where the first Bush president in the United States started the war in Iraq with this dramatic performance of a young lady, an actress and daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the US, crying in front of TV news camera and pleading for Kuwait and alleging that the Iraqi soldiers were throwing babies out of the incubators, bayoneting them and killing them. And that actually was just a setup, a drama. So there are countless instances like this, even in the Philippines, which I will cite later, and which was cited. One case was cited by Attorney Lambino earlier in his talk, mentioning the singularity hoax, which I will elaborate on, and I will have a photo of, I think. So the second very stark example of this fake news, where you see actual power players in the United States participate, is the lie of, well, this is from the Intercept, lie after lie, what Colin Powell knew about Iraq 15 years ago and what he told the United Nations. Remember, he held up a vial of what, God knows what, claiming it was a vial of anthrax that Saddam Hussein had in Iraq, and that justified the second Iraq War. Of course, as I go on, okay, propaganda is as old as the oldest legends in history. The lie of the serpent to Adam and Eve are, yeah, you can just keep rolling the video, the images here. Vatican's effort to propagate the faith. They had this congregation for the propagation of the faith. So the term propaganda has been in use for a very long time already, centuries past. Next is the, propaganda became a science with the psychology of Freud. Psychology of Freud, the Frenchman Gustave Le Bon, British social psychologist Wilfred Trotter, and public relations expert Edward Bernays. After the First and Second World Wars, the study of mass psychology and mass brainwashing became institutionalized in such centers as the Tavistock Institute. I hope someday we will have time to discuss, go in depth to these things, because that is the way they can manipulate populations, huge populations, like the 110 million people of the Philippines. The post-World War II rise of the United States of America as the global power also saw the rise of the CIA and its vast propaganda network. Former CIA co-founder and once co-chief who committed suicide later, Frank Wisner Sr., his son, Jr., also became ambassador to the Philippines, whom I had many discussions with. Frank Wisner Sr. called this huge global network of propaganda outlets the mighty Wurlitzer. The Wurlitzer is a brand of pipe organ, huge pipe organ used by the largest cathedrals and played in the grandest masses and so on. Did we show the, yeah. Now that is a book about the mighty Wurlitzer, which if you're interested to study further. In fact, the mighty Wurlitzer has been in operation in the Philippines since post-World War II. The Grand Wurlitzer book describes the operations all over the world, akin to the Philippines in the 50s during the struggle of the U.S. puppet government against the Partido Comunista ng Pilipinas and other nationalist elements. It funded, for example, $10,000, which was a huge sum at that time, annually to set up Francisco C. O'Neill Jose's journal Solidarity, as well as fund for pen, poets and playwrights, essayists, novelists, capturing the intelligentsia here. Okay. Next. Okay, and today we are familiar with the hundreds of billions of pesos. For example, to Rappler and other media in the Philippines by various institutions. Just two donations to Rappler, Omidyar, and North Base amounted to 100 million. What more the others? But we independent, the real journalists, we really have to scrounge from our own funds and so on. But anyway, justice has been done so far. Okay, in the era of US-China competition, the grand Wurlitzer plays even louder, as this next slide shows. Nikkei Asia reports recent $300 million added to the US Competition Act to compete with China for, quote, fighting online disinformation campaigns, unquote, which actually is US disinformation campaigns against China. One of the goals of the info war is instigation of permanent instability to maintain America first. Well, this is a cartoon about America first. And America at the head of the table today. That is the slogan of Biden. Slide 13 and 14 will make some points. What my goal, and ideally ours as Filipinos, as members of mankind, what is our goal? Is it not peace on earth, goodwill towards all men? So that our people and all future generations rise from poverty and insecurity. Isn't it the same message, the same dream that we read and hear constantly and consistently from the leadership of the United Nations and the People's Republic of China? So you see in front of you now the report of Nikkei Asia, which came out in many other international papers. This portion that I highlighted in yellow, among the proposed budget of the US is the $655 million in assistance to foreign countries to finance their purchase of American weapons and so on, plus $300 million annually for countering Chinese influence, which actually is the propaganda program against China. Okay. The next image, okay. So what is the goal of the US? I say here, one of the goal of the information war is instigation of permanent instability to maintain America first and America at the head of the table. This is an article by Ralph Peters in 2011 in the military magazine Parameters, and its title really highlights my point. Stability, America's enemy. Why? Because stability, stability will obviate, will negate the need for the global policeman. So they constantly maintain instability, and one of the main instruments is media. Okay, what is our goal? Peace on earth, goodwill to men. And this is an image by Global Times, a Chinese newspaper, stating how a community with shared future for mankind can defeat a virus. I think the humanitarianism, the COVID-19 humanitarianism of China really highlights its philosophy. It has donated and delivered both the purchase and donation 55 million vaccine doses to the Philippines, which allowed President Duterte's vaccine campaign to start this March 1, 2021. Otherwise, we would have been delayed despite the promises way back in October 2020 of Pfizer and Moderna, Ambassador Romualdez in Washington and Terry Locsin. They're in the paper. They were saying, yeah, it will be delivered and so on. They never delivered until June or July. What would have happened to us? But it was China that delivered despite some efforts to delay it in the FDA and so on. So our goal as Filipinos should be peace on earth, goodwill to men, which is the spirit of our season now, December, Christmas, and so on. But that has been the theme of the global community, the United Nations. And let's read the UNESCO preamble. UNESCO, I think the image is in front of you now. Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. And it is through information and media that these constructions for peace in the mind are done. But today, the US-dominated international news feeds are constantly intended to create instability, tension, and conflict to bring more wars to our world. China's message and actions from the 1950s Bandung Conference of Non-Aligned Nations to the construction and opening of the 1975 Tazara Railway that linked Tanzania and Zambia to the only seaport to liberate them from white Africa, which blocked them across the other side to the other part of the oceans. Onto the Belt and Road Initiative today, 50 years later. The mission of China, its stated mission, and you can see it in their action, is to build a community of shared future for mankind. And BIR, of course, is the tangible expression of this. How do we then deal with the Philippine-China reportage by Philippine mainstream media? Well, let me look at our next image. This is the similarity fake news that Attorney Lambino was referring to. They reported on the left side, China vessel dumped human waste in West Philippine Sea, blah, blah, blah. On the right side really is the true story. The Daily Mail reporting that the Australian, or this ship was dumping the picture that Similarity reported, GMA reported, Inquirer, Philippine Star, all republished, was actually a photo from Australia of a ship, maybe dumping, maybe we do not know exactly, but expelling a trail of sludge of some sort. And this was established, and this is only one of a constant stream of fake news every year since 2011, Obama's pivot to Asia. So this is what is known as information war. The next one I will cite is the Chiara Zambrano gimmick or hoax, renting a pump boat, going to Ayumi Shoal, claiming that they were chased by the Chinese Coast Guard. And he was even awarded by Chief AFP Chief Sobihana, who was only in his position for a few months, awarded for this reportage, which a few days later, because I think Malacanang asked Lorenzana, is this true? Lorenzana came out with and debunked this story of Chiara Zambrano, which ABS-CBN reported and Rappler reported. It was a fraud. And why did Lorenzana say it was a fraud? Because he says the Chinese Coast Guard cannot be outrun by the pump boat. If they were chasing Zambrano, they would have caught up. But if you look at all the videos of Zambrano, the Chinese Coast Guard, alleged Coast Guard's ships were so far away. So, gawa-gawa lang ito ni Zambrano. We let it go. Charges should have been filed against Ms. Zambrano. But they have a right to earn their living because the Pinoy Expose, tabloid, led by the National Press Club President Paul Gutierrez, reported this and made this expose. Information reached Pinoy Expose that the sortie to the West Philippine Sea of Zambrano has long been on the drawing board of the Institute for War and Peace Reporting, IWPR, which has close ties with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and the National Endowment for Democracy, both of which are known conduits of the CIA of the United States. Yeah. So, our mainstream media with a big letter M, just let this pass. But of course, it did not pass our scrutiny, and we exposed it. But our reach is very limited. Yet it still reached a lot of people. Okay, and let's move on. So similarity, ABS Charles Zambrano, hoax debunked by Panelo and Lorenzano. China has been very active in improving humanitarian and economic assistance to the Philippines. The Chinese embassy has been successful in promoting these deals through social and other media. The impact of direct soft power intervention in China has had such telling effect that the Publicus survey of July 2021 showed 53% of Filipinos have opened their attitude to China. Let's show that image, my final image. This is a 19th image. Filipinos' openness for China rising. I published this in Pressing Matters in Pinoy Expose. Publicus reported that Filipinos have held back their judgment in categorizing China as a clear friend or foe, taking 53% in China being a friend or enemy to the Philippines. In other words, they're open to it being a friend or an enemy. They are not saying that China is an enemy, as was the case in 2014, 2015. So there is a great deal of improvement. China has also been doing its part with the CCTV 9 and CCTV English News launched in 2000 and 2012. CCTV America was launched in 2012. The world and the Philippines intellectual elites saw the other side of the international news and stories. The launching of Russia's RT, or Russia Today, in 2005 also helped tremendously. And today I am seeing more engagement of Chinese journalists and media workers with Filipino counterparts. This is my last paragraph. The need to intensify cooperation amongst all sectors of Philippine society in promoting Philippine-China understanding is still the call of the hour. The United States is prodding its assets in the Philippines to overplay its hand, our hand in the claims to the South China. To overplay. We actually entered the picture only 1950s with Tomas Cloma, and then formal claims in former occupation of several 10 islands actually and features in the 1970s. While of course China's claim is historical, Vietnam's claim is also historical. And Vietnam in 1975, somewhere there, stole one of the islands that Marcos occupied, with Pugat Island. And we never say that China or Vietnam aggression. We never charge that. China never touched any of our occupied islands or features, yet we treat it as the only competitor or enemy or rival. So that's something that we need to clarify to the Filipino people. The U.S. is prodding the Philippines to overplay our hand in the South China Sea claims and disputes. So we might overreach and lose more than gain. They're hoping that we trigger the Philippine side, trigger a permanent impasse in the blossoming relations, or even cause a serious rupture in relations with China, in which the Philippines will be the only loser, or even face eventual isolation from ASEAN. The stakes are very high. So I'll leave it at that, and then Anna, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you po, Ka-Mentong, for that thought-provoking, very thought-provoking and informative, very enlightening presentation po. Ladies and gentlemen, again, feel free to write your questions and comment in the chat box. We will read them later during the open forum. So let's move on to the next part of our program. And this is now we will introduce our second resources speaker. Let me call on Raven again to play a short audiovisual presentation to introduce our second speaker. Raven?
Adolfo Paglinawan, or Ka-Ado as he is popularly known, is a Filipino journalist, public intellectual, and business professional with extensive experience in diverse fields. His active engagements in professional journalism and social media activism undeniably served as important training grounds in his writing and discursive prowess. Veering from a partisan approach to a more rationalized discourse of pressing issues confronting the Philippine society, he offers an alternative perspective that enables opportunities for peaceful diplomatic dialogues. Ado served as a press attaché and spokesman of the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C. from 1986 to 1993. Of his innumerable contributions and services to the Philippine society, it is his direct participation in the South China Sea debate that is most noteworthy and which likewise earned him the designation of an ambassador of goodwill. Said debate was inspired by the scandals revolving frustrated oligarchic capture of oil and gas opportunities at the Reed Bank or Recto Reef in 2011. The incompetent mishandling of Philippine foreign affairs resulting in the Scarborough standoff of 2012 and the subsequent filing of a case with the Permanent Court of Arbitration against China, backed by his training and experience in journalism and motivated by nothing but reporting as close as possible to facts. Ado stood his ground in facing off with U.S. Pinoys for good governance in a debate at Oxon Hill in Metro Washington, D.C. when he said a group of xenophobics launched its Shame China campaign in the U.S. Since then, Ado never lets off the South China Sea discussions, engaging his audiences through his articles in print and broadcast media and mobilizing together with Migrants Heritage Commission Chairman Arnedo Valera, a U.S. Pinoys for Real Change movement based in Washington, D.C., in a continuing attempt to present an alternative view amidst disinformation among Filipino Americans. Furthermore, Ka-Ado wrote and authored 2 noteworthy books. The first one was entitled A Problem for Every Solution, which for the most part is a situationer on the territorial dispute in the South China Sea, and the second book was entitled No Vaccine for a Virus Called Racism, which is a survey of COVID-19 implications from an international perspective.
Thank you, Raven. So without further ado, let us welcome our second resource speaker for today's Mr. Adolfo Ka-Ado Paglinawan. Ka-Ado, go, go, go.
The title of my work is Propaganda Kills, Truth Promotes Understanding. I would like to request a clip that I sent to you, Anna, by chat to be played while I'm speaking.
Okay, I'll have to communicate with Raven for this.
I started writing profusely when I was 12 years old, contributing poems and essays to The Little Bedouin when I was grade 5. 2 years after, I became its associate editor, graduating basically from mere writing to just waiting for the next issue. This continued on to high school, where I eventually became managing editor of Cub Recorder, also of San Beda, where I was lucky to have been mentored by Eric Herman of the Manila Times, who was our advisor. Across the street where I lived in Mandaluyong was Susek Hembao, congressional reporter of the Daily Mirror, and his wife, Jo David, who was tourism editor of the same newspaper. They encouraged me to show them my writings and help me edit them. Word processing was non-existent during those days. I made my articles using our family's Underwood typewriter and submitted my final drafts to my advisor who would polish my works. The articles would be submitted to a printing press that will retype these using a linotype machine, reducing this into rows of words converted into lead galleys. The rows of galleys will be applied with ink on the font size, a paper put on top of it, passed through a rubber roll to make galley proofs. We cut these galley proofs and lay them out on a bigger paper to a paper size. These page layouts will be assembled by a composer into a page of lead rows and columns placed under a letterpress to make the final prints. The process can take a week at least for you to finally have to distribute your newspaper. Today, you have MS Word for word processing, MS Publisher for layout, and your own HP printer to come out with your pages. When you have all your articles really good for 8 pages, you can have your small newspaper, also called a newsletter, in about an hour or so. For bigger sizes, you can adapt to a more appropriate publishing software and printer. Multiplication of copies is also now available through Xerox machines or bigger photocopiers. I also became managing editor of our college newspaper, The Belen. In 1967, my sophomore year, I was elected Secretary General of the College Editors Guild of the Philippines, and in 1968, the year after, its president. It was in 1967 that I attended the first Campus Press Freedom Seminar conducted by the Publishers Association of the Philippines, or PAPI, headed by Johnny Mercado and Victor Roll. After the event, I submitted a proposal calling for continuing studies for campus editors who were my members as a joint venture of PAPI and CEGP. Most of us were good writers, but not schooled in the rudiments of formal journalism. PAPI was composed of the mainstream press, and on its top, the big ones, the Manila Times of Chino Roses, the Philippines Herald by the Elizaldes, the Manila Chronicle of the Lopezes, the Manila Bulletin of Hans Menzi, to name a few. The leading magazine was the Philippines Free Press, led by the Locsin, and the afternoon dailies were the Daily Mirror and the Evening News. It was from the pillars of these institutions that I honed my journalism. More than 30 seminars and events all over the country I conducted in a period of 2 years, echoed in the provinces by PAPI's members in collaboration with my regional vice presidents. Our speakers were in the likes of Jose Luna Castro, Teodoro Valencia, Max Oliven, Nestor Mata, Neil Cruz, Jose Burgos, Eric Heron, Jun Iqban, Teddy Benigno, Rod Reyes, and many others. From the academy, we had Armando Malay. For legal justice, we had Fred Ruiz Castro, and for art and graphics, we had Larry Alcala and Nonoy Marcelo. This caught the attention of President Edwin Marcos, who included in his program encouraging people participation in government affairs, the studentry and the youth included. So in 1969, Executive Secretary Rafael Salas asked me if I could bring my editors to Malacanang, all expenses charged to his office, for a symposium involving key cabinet members to introduce their policies to the studentries, and culminating in the first open press conference with President Marcos, the picture of which was shown earlier. I filled the heroes hall with 180 from all over the country, given a 3 weeks notice. Why have I stated sharing this early? Because in my presentation, I would like to submit education on the basic journalism as a key solution to improve the capability of our natural writers. There are only a dearth of journalism classes, and most campus writers are majoring in some other subjects than writing. Most of them at this stage in the health and technology sectors, mind you. I mentioned Marcos. Let's fast forward. Marcelo brought radical changes to the media landscape because the president wanted the oligarchs out of the way. Retaining Manila Bulletin owned by Menzi, his friend, he allowed the Philippines Daily Express and Times Journal to become the major newspapers. He retained RBS, Channel 7 under Bob Stewart, but closed down ABS-CBN Channel 2 and converted its Channel 4 into PTV, a government station. Channel 5 of the Manila Times was also closed, and Channel 9 and 13 assigned to the Benedictos as RPN and IBC, respectively. But 14 years in this basic format under Marcos' authoritarianism was relatively docile when compared to what happened after he was removed from power in 1986. For the past 35 years, we have virtually seen a theater of information designed by three major media giants: the Philippines Daily Inquirer, the Philippine Star, and up until its franchise was not renewed, ABS-CBN. The Philippines Daily Inquirer was founded on December 1985 by publisher Eugenia Apostol, columnist Max Soliven, with Betty Go Belmonte during the last days of the regime of the Philippine dictator President Marcos, becoming one of the first private newspapers to be established under still the Marcos incumbency. The broadsheet morphed from the weekly Philippines Inquirer and Mr. and Mrs. Special Edition tabloid format that Apostol began right after the assassination of Benigno Aquino in 1983. In June 1986, President Corazon Aquino returned to ABS-CBN most of its radio and TV stations on a gradual and scheduled basis, with the notable exception of TV Channel 4, which remained with the government. On September 16, 1986, ABS-CBN resumed daily broadcasts of both TV and radio. In July 1986, however, questions about finances and divergence of priorities in the Philippines Daily Inquirer caused a rift that led Belmonte, Sullivan, and Art Morhal to split from Inquirer to establish Philippine Star. In March 2014, the newspaper was acquired by MediaQuest Holdings, a media conglomerate subsidized by PLDT Beneficial Trust Fund, after the company purchased a majority stock in Philstar Daily Inc., a company of Manny Pangilinan and Salim Group. In January 2012, Rappler joined the cartel, founded as an online news organization by journalists, so-called journalists Maria Ressa, Glenda Gloria Chaiho Filena, and Beth Frondoso. Together, this format became the most brazen violators of the principles of journalism in the country, the most frequent purveyor of fake news in the Philippines. Encyclopedia Britannica provides a simple definition of journalism as the collection, preparation, and distribution of news and relative commentary and feature magazines through such print and electronic media as newspapers, magazines, books, blogs, webcasts, podcasts, social networking, and social media sites and email, as well as radio, motion pictures, and television. What is news? News generally means information that has not been known earlier, but in journalism we refer to news as the factual report of an event. The basic measure is the 5 W's and 1 H, namely who, what, where, when, why, and how. Note that in the Britannica definition, commentaries or opinions published and feature stories are to be related to the news. One cannot invent assumptions, speculation, or conjecture, report it as news, much more comment on it or enlarge it into a feature. But today, Never has truth been challenged by no less than mainstream media engaged in the distortion of the truth, in that they have become purveyor of fake news. I will not deal so much on the information war, as I anticipate Ka-Mentong will render it a closer look. What I would like to connect instead is how fake news is weaponized into lawfare, or even wider. Lawfare is the misuse of legal systems and principles against an enemy to damage or delegitimize them, tying up their time or winning a public relations victory. The term is a portmanteau of the words law and warfare. This was used by George Walker Bush in justifying an all-out war against Saddam Hussein and some of their perceived enemies in the Middle East, like Muammar Gaddafi and Osama bin Laden. This was used by Donald Trump in attributing Wuhan as the origin of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the COVID-19 disease, not just to demonize China, but to frame up its culpability for reparations to the world. I used international news reports in a survey I published in a book to show that the pattern did not point east, but to about 10 miles from Washington, D.C. In an outbreak as early as June 2019, south in Springfield, Virginia, and west to Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland, before some 300 armed servicemen, Americans, participating in the World Military Games, brought it to Wuhan on October 2019, a good 3 months before the outbreak was confirmed in China. This was being used by former Secretary Albert de Rosario and former Associate Justice Antonio Carpio in portraying that we are at war with China over the Spratly Islands and the Scarborough Shoals. What we have is a dispute on territories and economic maritime zones that is easily resolved by bilateral consultations. This was used by Amnesty International that said there were 107,200 victims, mostly killed, tortured, and imprisoned by the Marcos regime. And they are not doing any better, I tell you, in Xinjiang, China, in their reports. We're finding that the claimants have only numbered less than 10,000, most of whom even bore arms against our established government. I devoted a lot of time in pointing at the fundamental flaw of how hate, the 30 years of Aquino the mother that started in 1986, continued on Aquino the son in 2016. And with a good support of 30 years of fake news by the yellow press that we now call. This delayed our cooperation with China for at least 6 years. My reason is simple. Given our interlinked cultures and traditions with Chinese people, since time immemorial, most poignant perhaps in the early 1400s in the friendship between Sultan Paduka Batara and Emperor Yongle. The key is in China's concept of harmonious society from Confucius himself. There is no exact translation of the Mandarin word "hosfe" in English, spelled Hexie. But what it means is reaching agreement without conflict, the pursuit of coexistence despite differences. Our Foreign Affairs Department must school in the Confucius key to harmony that provides the basic 4 ideas in China's foreign policy. The first, is seek harmony but not uniformity. The second, big countries should respect small ones and vice versa. The third, it is lonely at the top. No wonder China is sharing its huge prosperity with the rest of the world. Fourth, conflicts between states should be handled bilaterally, ensuring that any imbalance of power is corrected to achieve balance. This is exemplified in the Chinese government's policy of fostering amicable, secure, prosperous neighborhoods. China emphasizes on its own sovereignty without interfering in other countries' internal affairs, and by Chinese diplomatic concepts such as equality, mutual benefit, mutual aid, cooperation, and win-win solutions. The other aspect of mutuality is very important to our present pre-pandemic recovery situation. An understanding by our Western educated minds of China's democracy. Instead of private capitalism, it has state capitalism. Rather than liberal democracy, that the Chinese have deprioritized the democratic system, pushing economic rights over political rights of its citizens. Emerging economies are recognizing that democracy is not a prerequisite for economic growth. In case of the Philippines, the biggest obstacle to prosperity has proven to be politics. On the contrary, countries like Taiwan, Singapore, Chile, not just China, have shown that economic growth is a prerequisite to democracy. Thus, it has become problematic. How can anyone enjoy his freedoms if his basic economic needs are not fulfilled? In China, as China moves to becoming the largest economy in the world, the schism between the political and economic ideologies of the West and the East is likely to widen. We have to think our own model. As we enter into what is forming as an ASEAN century, we must be willing to challenge assumptions regarding all systems, even democracy and private capitalism, while seeking the next evolution of prosperity for our people that have grown close to 110 million. Earlier, I forwarded education of writers on the rudiments of journalism. Then I expanded the perspective to some topics where understanding are to be widened. Perhaps our institutions like APCU and the Federation of Filipino Chambers of Commerce and Industry can see where they can invest to see this through. I pose this development challenge, as not all writers have been privileged as I have been. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ka-Ado, for that equally enlightening and equally educational talk. No, it's thought-provoking as well. So to further discuss the points and ideas and perspective raised by both Ka-Ado and Ka-Mentong, let us move on to the open forum. This is the question and answer part of the program. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, feel free to write your comments and questions in the Zoom chat box. We will accommodate them as much as we can. So let me wait, because I have to open the message chat box. Yeah, that's one. So, okay, before questions, let me read the comments first. So the first comment came from Mr. Victor Lim. Congrats to Mr. Herman Laurel for that very nice presentation. And then Mr. Wilson Lee has both a comment and a question. So the first comment was sent to me via my phone. So I'll read it from my phone. Okay. According to Mr. Wilson Lee, in 1898, USS Maine explosion fake news had triggered USA war versus Spain, leading to colonization of the Philippines, Guantanamo Bay of Cuba, and Puerto Rico and Guam. So thank you, according to him, thank you both of you for very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. Okay, and another comment from Mr. Wilson Lee before his question is the start of yellow journalism term. Pulitzer hurts publishers. Okay, so it originated from them. Okay, let me read his question. Congratulations again to both of you, according to him. And the question is, what future do you both foresee for Philippine media landscape in 2022, especially after the election? Also, what hopes or reforms do you both advocate? So again, that's two questions. No? The first one is, what is the future that you see when you talk about Philippine media landscape in 2022, especially after the election? The other question is, what are the reforms do you hope to advocate when you talk about media in the Philippines?
Yeah.
Any one of you can answer, no?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Anna?
Yes, Paul.
Okay, so I will kick off the discussion.
Yes, Paul.
The Philippine media scenario will continue to be more of the same, but I think over the past, shall we say, 10 years, the seesaw has been more or less balancing itself because as I also initially entitled my discussion today, reality check. And over time, the population is able to do its own reality check. And of course, in terms of China, China has been helping the people see this also by actually practicing what it preaches about this community of shared future for mankind, of win-win relations and trading and so on. So American information war is doomed because it is only virtual reality. It cannot be sustained. It could be 50 years ago because they had the combination of everything, including political, military power, which they are also losing now. Internal problems in the United States, which threaten to collapse it actually, both politically and financially, economically. So in the Philippines, I think the Inquirer, ABS-CBN, was fortunately stifled by legal issues, which it richly deserves. However, there is no mainstream media that is truly independent. We can say Manila Times is. And some of the social media news networks like SMNI. But I hope this will grow, and I see it to be growing in the years to come. I think the politics in the country does not change our media environment. Hindi nakikialam ang politiko at ang gobyerno. In fact, that is one of the criticisms I have sa ating Duterte administration. They did not stiffen and make state media play a more dominant role, because who is going to speak for the public interest? Inquirer speaks for its own interests and its business owners. We know TV5, Business World is directly owned by Pangilinan with his business interests and so on and so forth. That is traditional in the Philippines. In the 50s, 60s, big financial interests also owned business. Chronicle was Lopez, Elizalde had Evening Post, and so on. The state media, which the only, yung maasahan lang publiko, no? The only pillar of objective information that the people can rely on, is so weak and so subdued and so intimidated by our politicos. I know this because I was able to contribute for around a year my articles to Philippine News Agency website. Then suddenly After 6 rejections of my articles, I gave up. Why? Some intervention happened in the Philippine News Agency. So how can they expect the Philippine News Agency to become more popular if they just have tepid news reports and tepid opinions and analyses and so on? But I was told by one of them, insiders, I'm sorry, our budget is up in the Senate, and there are people who do not want discussions about China that is positive and so on. So this is a real issue in the country. Now, I initially wrote in my last paragraph that the need for independent journalists to come together and set up a newspaper and so on, but a newspaper is no joke, as we see. Even just the startup for Rappler required hundreds of millions. So I think people will just have to learn to rely on small M media, people like us, Mauro Samonte, Bobby Tiglao, and so on, to get the full picture.
Okay. Thank you, Kado. Ka-Mentong, it seems like you don't see that much change, no? In after 2020 election when you talk about media landscape. But let's see what Kaado has to say about and what's the answer of Kaado to the question. Again, Kaado, the question is twofold, no? First one is, do you see there's a change after 2022 when you talk about media landscape? And the other one is, what are the reforms that you advocate? That's from Wilson Lipo. So,
Well, I would like to start with something doable. Ka-Mentong mentioned about the participation of North-based media and a media network in Rappler. And this has been put to check by the Securities and Exchange Commission. However, there will always be attempts, because it is not only media that foreign funders are penetrating. By the way, the media network is not to be underestimated. They were the major destabilizer that caused a regime change in Ukraine that fomented the Orange Revolution, taking out a pro-Russian president and replacing it with a Western puppet. Umijar is also in other places, just as the National Endowment for Democracy. The National Endowment for Democracy is the overt version of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. And so this is not just a matter of media objectivity. This is our social responsibility in reporting. This is a matter of national security. The most significant recipient of grants by the National Endowment for Democracy is Vera Files, who together with Rappler serves as the fact checker of Facebook. What an irony. So this is very much a matter of national security. I dare accuse Rappler in this forum and Vera Files of overt espionage. The same thing was found out by Lieutenant General Antonio Parlade, who presented to Congress with voluminous proofs that communist terrorists have been so organized by Joe Massison that they have sourced billions from Europe in order to fund their subversion against our government. But our legislators would rather talk about Farmally rather than this important legislation, which can arrive at the Foreign Agents Registration Act. just like in the United States, where incoming foreign funds, most likely to be used to promote or lobby political interests or personalities, are registered with the Department of Justice and monitored closely by a full-time agency in addition to the Anti-Money Laundering Council. That is one reform that can be done and immediately.
Okay.
The other reforms can only come in terms of constitutional change. We have to be a little authoritarian when it comes to information. We are no longer 45 million people during the time of President Marcos. We are now close to 110 million. And so our priorities should also change. And that was what I was saying at the closing of my presentation, that our view of democracy must now proceed from political entitlements, human rights, into more economic pursuits for the development, especially of the marginalized sector. And with too much freedom reeking from our ears, we cannot move. We cannot move without being overwhelmed by a tremendous pressure from the ruling class. And so there must be some kind of authoritarianism in the near future, especially when it comes to education, to information. Just as we are loosening controls on investments and productivity, banking, and ownerships of Philippine assets to would-be economic partners, because they are the ones who will make sure that we become a production basket and perhaps lead our neighboring countries in the ASEAN. I tell you, when it comes to China, the Philippines is not just a distant cousin, but a long lost friend and brother. I will not underestimate our pool of affection from our Chinese counterparts from mainland China. We are connected by history, heritage, and culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cardo. And now let's read the next question. It's from Reine Grulmans. I am sorry if I did not pronounce your surname properly, but your question is this: Rappler, Verifiles, and PCIJ. PCIJ is Philippine Investigative Journalism. Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, I think that's PCIJ, are all receiving funds from the NED, National Endowment for Democracy. Surely this colors their journalism towards American interests instead of Philippine interests. What can be done to stop this? That's the question. What can be done to stop all this? You know, Rappler, Verifiles, being biased, I think, in terms of news reporting.
Well, if I may, I think
Yes.
some other countries or societies have also faced this problem with the American-funded media in their countries, reporters and so on. Russia, for one, passed a law requiring these media outlets that are funded by foreign funds to register. So they're allowed to operate, but they are listed among those that are foreign funded. So that's one of the things we could do. I think the U.S. also has such a law, and so I think it's about time that the Philippines also has something like that. We do not want to suppress or ban because it has its value so long as we can balance it with the contrary view and news reports and so on. But I would just like to mention that in the Philippines, the foreign overseas correspondence, overseas correspondence of the Philippines, the FOCAP, is really a hotbed of disinformation and misinformation. And this group of Western primarily journalists have been a big issue in terms of information war situations. Of course, the Chinese media are also registered there, but I don't think they're very active. Other countries are there, but not very active. It's really the Western media that's dominating the FOCAP, and it has been at the forefront news reports against Duterte and against Philippine-China relations and the improvement of these relations. For example, Mogato, what's his first name? Manuel Mogato, Manny Mogato, was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for EJK reporting with a Western reporter jointly. These reports were based on the exaggerated figures of 10,000, 25,000 deaths, and so on and so forth. But I call Manny Mogato the male version of the Maria Ressa Nobel Prize honoree. But the FOCAP is really the center of these information warriors from the West.
Okay, thank you po, Ka-Mentong. Kado, do you have an answer to this? The question is, what can be done to Rappler, Verifiles, and PCIG receiving funds from NED, and then that's why they become biased, no? They are more promoting American interests rather than Philippine interests.
Well, I suggest former Justice Antonio Carpio should start lawyering and investigating these people instead of spreading fake news, Spratlys at Scarborough Shoal. He may have better professional fees arriving by way of this productive and constructive policing. I suggested earlier the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That is what Ka-Mentong was saying, with stricter penalties, because the Filipinos tend to be mahilig sa palusot, no? And the only thing they really worry about is the death penalty. But because we are so fond of having criminals going back into our streets, we would rather protect our human rights and claim that even lockdowns are violation of our freedoms of movement. So it is basically coming up. We don't have a wellspring of writers from below, honed by education, good practices, ethics, the right way of writing and editing. Yun din yung sinasuggest ko kanina, no? But nobody can really teach people not to be corrupt. Even media is corrupt. So why can't the long arm of the law reach these people who are engaged in corruption, that are so brazen before our eyes? It is the job of our legislators to see to it that there are laws. I'm not just about to suggest that print media are also accorded franchises. These are very debatable issues. But radio and television can be policed. Papi used to do some self-policing when it comes to the print media. KBP used to do some policing until the death of what's his name, Serge Raimundo. He was very active in that. We have to have within the industry, we have to excite their sense of love of country and productive pursuits. And not just this payola business. And I feel starting early in college, we can do what we did in the past by coming up with some writers. But we don't stop there. We feed this with continuing symposia and fora like this on the proper ventilation of the different sides of the issues so that they're also educated. Some of these people who are just saying that we own something in the South China Sea is just plainly mal-educated. That is why they don't want to face Ka-Mentong and I in open debate. We have been sending Albert de Rosario challenges, si Carpio, si Heydarian, si J. Batumbakal. Namatay na si Roy Lugoles. Ayaw humarap ng mga yan. Kung hindi kami ayaw humarap kay Rosario Manalo, ayaw humarap kay Albert Encomienda. So talagang ano na lang eh. Square na lang sa media. And thirdly, we should really have our own Facebook, a Filipino version of a Facebook. I don't know, this might entail a big investment, but if we own our Facebook, we can ban Facebook altogether. Something like that.
Yes. So basically, both of you are it seems like from what I can surmise, like, government regulations and at the same time training and more capacity building for new writers and nationalist writers, I think. No, so thank you for both of you for answering the first two questions. Now let me move on to the question and comment coming from Mr. Celso. I'll read the comment first. No, state media has low audience. They should put competent people there who knows how to make gimmick. But many of these people are in mainstream media because state media don't pay well. So that's the first that's the comment. Now let me read the question, which is actually true. No, I would agree. Well, me having experience in media, it seems like to a certain extent there's truth to that. And then the question is, as the United States and China prepare for war, should Philippine media continues to be an ACDC? Attract, collect, defend, collect. That's ACDC. Or transcends monetary interests and becomes the herald of truth. Mainstream media is motivated by money. Social media is controlled by the oculist, elite, and they censor information contrary to their interests. How do you deal with this? So that's twofold question again. The first question is, China, United is preparing war, so attract, collect, defend, transcends monetary interest and becomes herald of truth. And the other one is all about social media. So, social media being controlled by certain groups of people. How do we deal with all this? So let me call on Ka-Mentong and then Ka-Ado.
Yeah. I think Facebook, for example, has become really a very useful instrument for us independent advocates for facts and truth. But of course, also we can see very clearly that the United States is slowly constricting this and restricting views contrary to their geopolitical interests. but we have to live with it for a while and use guerrilla tactics to survive this. Our techie, Joshua, has been very competent in going around all these algorithms of Facebook. But countries have also taken action against Facebook, Google, and the others. They also instituted legislation to ensure that there is fair and just access to Facebook, or also to control the abuse of Facebook by Facebook and the people behind it. They're fact checkers, for example. Here in the Philippines, ironically, the fact checkers of Facebook are the ones that we are discussing today, Rappler and so on, funded by the American NGOs, American oligarchs, and so on. But can we expect our legislature to take action on this? I don't know. We will have to wait for this next election. The elections do work somehow in the Philippines because President Duterte got elected and changed a lot of things. In the next election, we will see what the outcome will be and whether it will be good for the progress of this country and the progress in the information and news field. Celso Cainglet, he's from Iloilo, is correct. The US is preparing for war with China if China cannot prevent it by its more proactive campaign for win-win solutions, dialogues, and so on, because China will not benefit from any global conflict. It will just stunt its growth and frustrate its dreams of the China dream of making China a moderately prosperous country by 2049. So it is the US that is fanning all these tensions, and as I explained in my presentation a while ago, they are aiming for, number one, instability, and two, catching up with China in military capabilities and so on. Can Philippine media desist from being attacked? Actually, that's attack and collect, defend and collect. That is the envelopmental journalism or yellow journalism. You know, they get paid to attack and they get paid to defend. Well, that actually is a global phenomenon. No? The ACPC. I remember lecturing on this in my journalism class 20 years ago, where I studied the different attack and collect journalism of different countries. Russia has a term for it, Zarazuka. They have a specific term for that kind of journalism. Of course, the West would have the yellow journalism and so on. But that is a reality. Journalism doesn't really pay. And I used to tell my students, unless you're prepared to go hungry a bit, or your wife will do some business to sustain you, journalism is not an easy mission for life. So I think the best thing to do for us to prevent what the West, what the United States in particular wants, because European Union is trying to prevent war too, although they're also being pushed by NATO now in the borders of Ukraine and Russia. I think the best thing for us to do is just continue to promote the facts and the truth and the reality check with the people, and truth shall prevail. That's how I see it.
Thank you, Ka-Mentong. So for you, it's at the end of the day, it's all about truth and facts still, no? For being responsible journalist and being responsible media practitioner. So Kaado, before I go on to the last question, any response to this question of Mr. Celso po? So about social media.
Let me share to you something about state media. Because I'm involved in it. I'm an anchor in Radyo Pilipinas Uno. I would like to take this occasion to thank the People's Republic of China for improving our apparatus Many people are complaining about Secretary Andanar, but very few knew that with some consultations, I was able to help him, motivate him to ask. Sabi nga, di ba, if you don't ask them, nobody will know you need something. In one of the bilateral talks with China, Secretary Andanar was able to get a good grant for the improvement of PTB4 and the PBS radio stations. I'm talking about the apparatus. Not only in Metro Manila, but in major regional centers, specifically Davao and Cagayan de Oro, for starters. The plan is to project PTB4 up to 120 kilowatts of power. The maximum ABS was able to do was 60 kilowatts. But ABS was able to have many repeaters. But PTB from Visayas Avenue, if you pass by the circle, look at the antenna, and I tell you, that antenna has improved 20 times than it was 60 years ago. And it will soon be on 120 kilowatts. Equipment, fantastic. Not just radio and television equipment, but also the facility, even air conditioning. We're part of a grant that China gave our PCOO for PTV4 and PBS radio stations, to the point that the FM stations of the government, FM1 is some 1, 2, or 3. It's always in the top 3. FM1 Republica. And FM2, the capital, is in the 3, 4, 5, 6. They're top raters. They're within the top 10. Radyo Pilipinas went as far as top 5. That's the best we could do. RP1. So there is a remarkable help in the field of media, of government media, coming from our friends in China.
Yeah.
But Celso says state media don't pay well. Well, my only comment to this is it used to until Congress cut the budget.
Yeah.
So,
This is a reality, you know.
These are realities, yes.
Yeah.
Congress is always jealous of these small things. When there is accomplishment, it is Congress. Perhaps there are too many of them. We have to reinvestigate, review the numbers of these people.
Mhm.
Because they hide behind numbers and they're not always rational. And they cut the budget. Once you become effective, you suffer in government.
So
So,
that's,
pagdating naman sa social media, yung sinuggest ko kanina,
yes.
some Filipino should really come up with our own Facebook
Mhm.
and media platforms.
Yes. So before we proceed to the last part of our program, which is the closing remark, may I read the last comment of Mr. Celso? I believe in Ka-Mentong that the best strategy against prostitution is guerrilla tactics. I just have to ask this last question because I think the last questions would define and would, to a certain extent, summarize everything that we've discussed in this forum. The last question before the closing remark is, in what way do you think media and media cooperation between the two sides, the Philippines and China, could be improved and enhanced? What are your suggestions? Because we're talking about two countries, no? And both countries has media in establishment and practitioner. So how can we facilitate cooperation between these entities so that we could have an improved and enhanced Philippine-China bilateral understanding and friendship?
Yeah, I'd just like to
Yes.
add to the comprehensive reportage of Ado on state media and Andanar.
Yes, ma'am.
China donated up to several hundred millions of equipment to PTV4, RP1, and that was what Ado was explaining. I think the Chinese embassy is very frustrated with the donation because they just had a single program, Wow China, 1 hour every Sunday with two Chinese journalists and two Filipino journalists discussing culture and so on, really non-political, non-geopolitical issues. Yet there was direct intervention from the Senate, Luisa Hontiveros, to stop it, and it was eventually stopped. So I think that was a lesson for the Chinese embassy, and they had hopes that PTV4 and RP1 would really be able to communicate more extensively the broader issues of culture, civilization, and so on. Well, anyway, that's a lesson learned. What was your question, Anna? Your final question?
Yeah, the final question is what do you think should be done to have this media cooperation between the two countries, no, China and the Philippines, media networks and practitioner, so that the Philippine relation with China will be improved and vice versa.
Well, in 1999, I remember then Ambassador Fu Ying to the Philippines, who is now a state councilor, just two or three ranks below President Xi Jinping, wrote a letter of appreciation of thanks to me because I reported accurately, factually, a presentation she made at the Sulu Media Forum, yung Sulu Kapihan, it's called at that time. In the first decade of the 21st century, they were quiet. I think, of course, in 2008, China and U.S. relations were very good because President Bush, the second Bush, the junior, called China to help in the financial crisis of the United States by buying up to $800 billion of bonds, or $700 billion, and also to pump prime the Western economy with the stimulus package of, I think, 4 trillion or more inside China that built the 35,000 kilometers of fast trains and so on, roads, bridges, science and technology and so on. But a lot of the initial equipment came from the West. So, but it was at that time, 2008, that the US started also revising its view of China as a threat, not as a friend, ironically. And at that time, I only made, in the entire 10 years, I only made one effort to visit the Chinese embassy to talk about media, and they were really not interested. In 2012, 2013, there was one single Chinese correspondent who started communication with me. But in the past few months, I have been interviewed. My essays have appeared in Global Times. Their correspondents in the Philippines are interviewing me much more. Paglinawan had, I think, 5 interviews with various media in China. They are getting more aware of the possibilities from cooperation with journalists in the Philippines, for example. So I think this trend will continue to grow, and it will grow on its own momentum. But still key to the question, key answer to the question is what will happen in the 2020 elections and what policies will the new government um, enunciate with regards to media. I think there's a lot to be done, a lot of changes to be done in Philippine media, such as legislation to control foreign funding for news media, to be true to the Philippine Constitution, and so on. So I don't know if I answered your
Yes.
question,
Question.
Anna.
Yes, po. It seems like we need more interaction between media practitioners from both sides, from China and the Philippines, to bridge more, exchange of information and printing of some materials in Chinese media and here also. So briefly, Kado, before I go on to the closing remark, any response to the question? I mean, in terms of improving the relation of two sides. Of course, we're talking about media networks and media practitioners.
Programs in the government stations are vulnerable to. You have to be as courageous and bold as yours truly, so that these senators won't touch you. But when it comes to cultural, I would like to say, bring back this program in and take out Risa Hontiveros from the Senate would be the best solution to that. But future politicians are not that open-minded, especially senators who just won by Smartmatic are not worried about their terms. So I would encourage a workshop regarding this issue, perhaps started by Philippine Greek Society and IDSI, to come and let's discuss let's brainstorm on how to, because there are still many questions that will come after this forum, I'm sure. Going as far as proposing legislation to the incoming Congress, and proposing and lobbying the incoming president to be a little bit more circumspective when it comes to media. Because as I entitled my work, propaganda kills, truth promotes understanding. So there are also ways of going around these people. Like there are cable networks, there are satellite networks. We can talk about all these details and propose it perhaps to APCU, the chambers, or even the Chinese embassy if they would be interested. But this would be together with my proposal for early education, as much as early as high school. We should invest in educating them, because dyan sila nagsisimula. That's where they start, forming their journalistic values and journalistic preferences.
Yes.
There are many people in media that you cannot buy. Why? Because they have loved their profession more, and they have early learned how to make money from other things than selling their journalistic prowess.
Okay, thank you, Kaado. Okay, no, because we're already 4:52, and I think I would like to thank both of you for your presentation. It's thought-provoking, very interesting, and a lot of thoughts was triggered in this discussion. Thank you very much, Ka-Mentong and Kaado, for that very wonderful presentation. Now let me call on the President of APCU, President Jeffrey Nang, to deliver the closing remark. Sir Jeff.
APCU Chairman, Secretary Raul Albino, fellow trustees, officers, and members of APCU, to our resource speakers, Mr. Herman Ka-Mentong Laurel, and Mr. Adolfo Paglinawan, media partners, friends, and colleagues, a pleasant afternoon to all. Media and journalists are powerful driving forces of modern society. They are not just a source of information for the general public, but also a potential vehicle for educating the public, a vital service, especially when it comes to important national issues. Furthermore, media is a medium of information communication. It serves as a significant conduit and bond for friendly exchanges and people-to-people exchanges. Media exchanges and cooperation play an integral part in the development and promotion of enhanced understanding, profound friendship, and fruitful Philippines-China bilateral relations through the spread of accurate and truthful information. Thus, media and media cooperation between the Philippines and China must continuously be cultivated, developed further, and constantly advanced to a new level. Likewise, Filipino and Chinese media should carry out in-depth exchanges, increase coverage of each other's state affairs in depth and breadth, and should forge close cooperation, especially in reporting accurate information and factual stories about their respective countries to bridge better understanding, which facilitates better relations between the two countries. Both sides should also tell and share stories of how the two countries, the Philippines and China, work together to promote peace and win-win cooperation, common development, mutual learning, state-to-state and people-to-people relations and exchanges. Even how the two countries put forth efforts to resolve their differences and conflict of interest through diplomacy and peaceful means to contribute more to the promotion of improved understanding and friendship between the Philippines and China. Conversely, the spread of bad and irresponsible journalism and fake news is not only an antithesis of media freedom, but to a considerable degree jeopardizes the building and flourishing of good relations, better understanding, and friendship between Philippines and China. Hence, in an epoch where fake news, disinformation, and misinformation are prevailing and widespread, media networks and journalists should rise above and fight fake news with legitimate and balanced news reporting and broadcasting. They must accept the challenge of carrying out well-researched stories done prudently and judiciously. I believe that the job and role of a good and respectable journalist and media network are to report the truth and facts of a particular issue and not to invent erroneous stories. Journalists have to further those ends by seeking the truth and providing a fair and comprehensive account of events and issues. Conscientious journalists and media networks should endeavor to serve the public with thoroughness and honesty. Hence, journalists and the media industry will only be truly instrumental in the genuine promotion of better understanding and deeper friendship between the Philippines and China if they carry out their duties based on dignity and integrity. On this note, on behalf of APCU, once again, I would like to congratulate and extend my sincere gratitude to two of our resource speakers and APCU laureates, Mr. Herman Ka-Mentong Laurel and Mr. Adolfo Paglinawan, for sharing their ideas, knowledge, and experience this afternoon. Let me express as well my gratitude to all of you who have joined and participated in this APCU forum today. I hope you've learned something. Indeed, your presence and dynamic participation have made this forum a fruitful and very informative endeavor. Again, thank you to everyone. Let us all be bearers of accurate and truthful information to effect change and empowerment both on the personal and societal level and in the promotion of understanding and friendship between the Philippines and China. A pleasant day to all. Merry Christmas and advance Happy New Year. See you all at the next APCU Forum next year. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, President Sir Jeff. President Jeff ng APCO po. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, our forum has come to an end. And on behalf of APCO, again, I would like to say thank you to everyone who participated. I would like also to express our heartfelt thanks to our esteemed resource speakers, Ka-Mentong and Ka-Ado, for sharing your ideas, knowledge, on this topic. This topic is very, very interesting, actually. We hope that our participants have learned so much from you both, and we will see you in our next APCO forum, which is next year already. So this is our end year activity for APCO in terms of APCO forum. So Merry Christmas to all. Advance Happy New Year po. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe and healthy. And thank you very much again for attending. And see you again next year po. January, we will see you all. Thank you po, everyone. Thank you.
Take
Maraming
care, everyone.
salamat.